everybody, what's up? My name is Lily and I'm going to do a quick intro to knitting tutorial. I'm going to go over how to cast on stitches, how to knit, and how to purl. To get started, you'll need a ball of yarn. I'm using a fingering weight yarn because that's what I had lying around, but if you're just getting started, you'll probably want something that's a little thicker. You'll also need a pair of knitting needles. I'm using size 9 circular needles because that's what I had on hand, but in general I prefer circular needles to the standard straight needles because your yarn doesn't fall off the ends. So the first step is to cast on stitches, and to start you'll need to take a length of yarn and make a slip knot. I like to do this by wrapping the yarn around my fingers like so, and then pulling it across and then through the loop that I just made, and now pulling it taut. Now we have a nice loop, and we're going to put our knitting needle through that loop and pull the shorter end of the thread that isn't connected to the ball of yarn tightly to the needle. You want it to be pretty tight because you don't want it to slip off of your needle, but not too tight because you are going to be knitting through it. Now we're going to actually cast on. So we start by taking your thumb and your pointer and separating the two ends of thread. So now we're going to actually cast on. Hold the ends of yarn like this with the bottom of the strands between your remaining fingers and your palm. Now we've created two loops, 1 and 2, and we're going to move the needle between them to create new stitches. So we go under the first loop, then over and through the second, and pull that back through the first. Pull that about as tight as we pulled the first loop. Now we're going to repeat this until we have enough stitches for our desired product. So we just go under, over, and through. Under, over, and through. Now I'm going to finish casting on the rest of the stitches really quick and we'll get back to it. Alright, this is what it should look like on your needle when you've cast on all of the stitches that you want. And now we're ready to move on to knitting. To start knitting, I hold my needle with all of the stitches we just cast on in my left hand, and the needle with no stitches on it in my right hand. Take the strand of yarn that's attached to the ball and wrap it around your right index finger like this, and then hold the needle in your remaining fingers and your thumb. Now to make the knit stitch, we're going to take our right needle and go from the front of the first loop on the left needle through to the back, and make sure that you're holding the yarn behind your right needle. Then we're going to take the yarn around our finger and wrap it around our right needle, going under and then over, and now we're going to pull that loop through the stitch on the left needle, and we're going to slip it off of the left needle so our new stitch is on the right. So we go through from the front to the back, go under and then over, pull that through, and slip the stitch off. Through, around, pull through, and slip off. And we'll continue doing this until we've gone through all of the stitches that are on the left needle so that each one has moved to the right. I'm just going to finish up this row, and then we'll move on to purling, which is just the opposite of a knit stitch. And there it is, we now have our our first row of knit stitches complete. Alright, so let's get on to the purl stitch. We're going to hold our needles the exact same way with the yarn wrapped around our index finger, but this time we're going to keep the yarn in front of our right needle instead of behind because we're going through the stitches the opposite direction. So we're going to go from the back of the stitch through to the front and then wrap around the same way. So underneath the needle and then over. Now we're going to pull it through the stitch the exact same way and slip the stitch off the left needle and onto the right to make our new row. Now we'll do it again from back to front, wrap around the needle, pull through, and slip off. So we slip from back to front, go under and then over, pull the yarn through, and slip off. One more time, through, wrap around, pull through, and slip off. Alright, so let's take a look at the purl stitches we've just done, and you can see that they have this little ridge at the top. It's like a little loop. You can see right there. Now let's compare that to a knit stitch and see how they're different. So I'm going to do a couple of knit stitches now, just so that we can compare. So if we look at the 4 purl stitches that we started out with, you can see the little ridge at the top right there, that little loop of yarn, compared to the knit stitches, which are flat on top and have no loop. However, if we flip it around and look at the back of our knitting, you can see that the 4 purl stitches at the beginning are flat, just like the knit stitches on the other side, and the knit stitches that we just did all have that little ridge. And this is what I mean when I say that knits and purls are the opposite of each other. When you do a knit stitch, that ridge will be on the back of your knitting, and if you do a purl, the ridge will be on the front of your knitting. You can combine knits and purls like this to make different patterns in your projects. Alright, so besides the 5 knit stitches that we did in the middle, this is our finished purl row, and you can see that it makes this kind of flat pattern that matches the first knit row that we did and creates a cohesive kind of look to your knitting piece. Then if we flip over and look at the back, we have the back side, which is the purled side, and it creates this kind of zigzag pattern with the ridges from the purl stitches. Let me show you what this pattern looks like on something that's a little bit more finished. So this is a tiny little sweater that I've done in the past, and this is the knit side, and you can see that it makes this smooth, cohesive V-like pattern. Now here's the purl side, and you can see those ridges that make that zigzag kind of pattern. And this is probably one of the most common knitting patterns. It's called the stockinette stitch, and you see it in almost anything that you make. It's just made of those alternating knit and purl rows. And here's an example of how you can use those alternating knits and purls to create a pattern in whatever garment or project you're making. Alright, I hope that was helpful for everybody. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. Please comment, rate, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.